It began with a lie. "You're being promoted." That's what Victor Lane said to me, his eyes steady but hollow. He stood in his office, immaculate as always, minimalist decor, a skyline view, the air-conditioned chill that never quite touched the soul. I was standing there, coffee in hand, still flushed from the morning train, when he said it. "You're being promoted, Natalie. Effective immediately." I blinked. Promoted? To what? He didn't smile. He didn't explain. Instead, he walked to the door, locked it, and closed the blinds with trembling fingers. That's when I felt the air shift. Victor Lane wasn't a man who trembled. He was steel and ice, the kind of executive who fired people with a nod, who never once remembered my birthday or asked how my daughter was doing. But that morning, he looked at me like I was the only person in the world he could trust. He placed a sealed envelope on the table, pushed it across to me. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You must not open this here. Go home. Pack a bag. Take your daughter. You have 24 hours. I stared at him, waiting for a smirk, some clue that this was a test, a cruel joke. None came. He turned back to the window like he couldn't bear to watch me fall apart. I left the building in a haze, the envelope tucked deep in my coat. The city buzzed around me, honking cars, murmuring crowds, the smell of roasted peanuts from a street vendor. But it all felt muffled, like I'd stepped into a glass box. My name is Natalie Reyes. I'm 29 years old. A single mom. Just a regular woman, unnoticed, unremarkable to most. I work in admin at Hallwell & Pierce, a boutique financial firm in the heart of the city. For 3 years, I've processed payrolls, filed reports, and sat through meetings that could put anyone to sleep. Until today. When I got home, Ava came running to me in her fuzzy socks, crayons still clutched in her little hands. "Mommy." I drew us riding a unicorn in space. I smiled, tried to match her joy. But something inside me had cracked wide open. After she went back to her drawing, I opened the envelope. Inside was a one-way plane ticket to Merrow Creek, Colorado. A prepaid phone with a single number saved, call only this. And a photograph of Ava, taken just that morning. She was standing outside her school. I hadn't taken the photo. The note was short. "They know what you saw. If you are still in the city after midnight, they will come for you and Ava. Trust no one. You are being watched." I froze. What had I seen? I tried to recall every task I'd done in the past week. Reports. Financial audits. There had been one account, dormant for years, that suddenly received a massive overseas transfer. $20 million. I flagged it. Asked my department head. She told me to approve it and forget it. I hadn't. And apparently, someone knew. Within the hour, I was packing. Clothes. Cash. IDs. Ava's favorite plush dragon. I told her we were going on an adventure. She cheered. I cried quietly in the hallway. Then the burner phone buzzed. No ring-tone, just a flash. "They're watching the building. Leave through the back. Take only one bag each. Don't talk to anyone." It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. I scooped Ava into a coat, told her we were playing secret agents. She loved it. Laughed all the way down the back stairwell. I wasn't laughing. My heart was pounding as we slipped through the alley to my car. Every stranger's glance felt too long. Every sound too sharp. We drove to the airport. I kept checking the rearview mirror. There was a black SUV 2 cars behind us. No plates. No lights. At the terminal, Ava fell asleep in my lap as we waited to board. I held her tightly, staring at the clock. Midnight was coming. And I still didn't know what I'd done to deserve this. The plane took off just before the deadline. As the city lights disappeared beneath the clouds, I looked at Ava, peaceful in sleep. I whispered a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. "I'll protect you. No matter what." I didn't know who had sent the envelope, or who would be waiting for us on the other end. But I knew this. I was no longer just an employee. I was a target. The first thing I noticed when we landed in Merrow Creek was the silence. It wasn't the absence of sound, it was the presence of stillness. The way the wind whispered between the pines, the distant hum of a snowplow, the sharp bite of mountain air that cleared your lungs and clouded your thoughts. After the chaos of the city, it felt too calm, like the quiet before a storm. I stepped off the plane holding Ava's hand, her little fingers wrapped in mine like ivy. She was half awake, eyes blinking against the pale sunrise. "Is this where our adventure begins?" she asked. I smiled, masking the weight in my chest. "Yes, baby. It begins here." A black pickup truck waited at the curb, engine running. The driver stepped out before I could even look around. He was tall, rough around the edges, with a face like worn granite and eyes that had seen too much. "Natalie Reyes?" I hesitated. "Yes. Name's Mason. Victor sent me." "Get in." He didn't offer a smile. He didn't ask questions. Just opened the passenger door and waited. Ava climbed in first, chatting about how the trees looked like frozen broccoli. I followed, tension in every muscle. Once we were moving, I turned to him. "What is this place? Why here?" Mason kept his eyes on the road. "Because it's the last place they'll look. For now." We drove for nearly an hour into the forest, up winding roads that cut through dense evergreens and over icy streams. Finally, we reached a cabin nestled deep in the woods, rustic, weathered, and completely off-grid. There were solar panels on the roof, satellite dishes mounted discreetly along the ridge, and security cameras tucked beneath wooden beams. It wasn't a retreat. It was a fortress. Inside, the heat hit me like a wall. The place smelled like cedar and coffee. There were maps on the walls, files stacked in neat piles, and a laptop open with encrypted screensaver code still spinning. Mason handed me a folder. "Victor said you'd understand once you saw this." I opened it slowly. Inside were transaction logs, offshore accounts, shell companies, and one name that made my breath catch in my throat. Senator Caleb Harlan. He wasn't just a politician, he was a rising star. Champion of economic reform. Face of integrity. I'd seen him on every news channel, every election banner. But according to these files, he was the central node in a sprawling financial conspiracy stretching across continents. He used Howell and Pierce to launder money, Mason said. Millions at first. Then billions. You flagged the wrong transfer. They traced the login back to you. My knees buckled. I sat on the edge of the couch. All I did was question a number. That was enough. That night, I lay in a bed that wasn't mine, in a room that smelled like dust and gun oil, with my daughter curled up beside me. I watched her sleep and thought of everything I had ignored. The way Victor had grown quieter. The encrypted emails. The sudden resignations. Maybe I had seen more than I realized. Maybe I had been the only one looking at the right thing. The burner phone buzzed. A new message. He's coming to Marrow Creek. You have 2 days. Trust no one. Not even Mason. I stared at the words, heart thundering. 2 days until what? And who is he? I didn't sleep that night. Not really. My body was still, but my mind raced through every possibility. I watched the shadows crawl across the ceiling. I replayed the message over and over in my head. Who is coming? Why would I need to be warned about Mason? Had Victor lied to me? Or was someone else trying to wedge paranoia between us? At dawn, I crept into the living room. Mason was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a pile of documents in front of him. He didn't look at me when he spoke. You saw the message. I froze. How do you know? He tapped the phone lying between us. They send the same one every time. Different wording, same intent, distrust. Divide. Distract. You didn't answer the question. His eyes met mine. Because I know you already did. I didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. Mason poured me coffee, slid the cup across the table. I'm not your enemy, Natalie. But I can't be your shield either. You need to decide who you trust and why. Later that day, I stepped outside with Ava. She was drawing pictures in the snow with a stick, humming to herself, happy in a way only children can be when they don't realize the world is collapsing around them. A noise behind me made me turn. A man stood at the edge of the tree line, dressed in a thick coat, his face shadowed by the brim of a hat. He wasn't moving. Mason, I called out without turning away. We have company. Mason appeared instantly, gun in hand, scanning the trees. The man lifted his hands slowly. I'm not armed. My name is Ellis. I know Victor. He sent me. Mason didn't lower the gun. I stepped forward. You know Victor? I was his handler. In the agency. Before they burned him. That word agency hung in the air like smoke. What agency? I asked. Ellis pulled something from his coat and tossed it to Mason. It landed in the snow with a soft thud. A badge. Worn, scratched, but still legible. It bore the seal of the Central Intelligence Directorate. He knew they were watching him. He sent you here for a reason. But Marrow Creek isn't safe anymore. I looked at Mason. He hadn't taken his eyes off Ellis. He's not wrong, Mason said finally. We've been compromised. I looked at Ava, still blissfully unaware, then back at the men. What happens now? Ellis's expression hardened. Now? We run. The decision was made before I could weigh it properly. When you're a mother, when someone you love is threatened, logic is often the first casualty. So we ran. Mason and Ellis packed in under 15 minutes. Weapons. Files. Portable hard drives. Anything that could trace us or track us was destroyed. I barely had time to stuff Ava's sketchbook and plush dragon into her backpack before Mason was pulling up the false flooring and revealing a snow-covered ATV with emergency fuel canisters strapped to its sides. Ellis handed me a sat phone. It's encrypted. Only one number in it. If I tell you to run and hide, you take your daughter and you call that number. They'll know what to do. I didn't ask who they were. I just nodded. We rode out through a hidden trail that curved down the side of the mountain, winding between frozen trees and old fire roads that hadn't been used in years. The wind bit at my face, but Ava giggled the entire way, her arms wrapped around my waist, yelling, "Faster, faster." She still thought it was a game. By the time we reached the safe house, an abandoned ranger station buried in the pines, the sky had begun to gray. Snow threatened the horizon. Inside, it was dark, damp, but secure. Ellis built a fire. Mason disappeared into the forest to check perimeter cameras he'd allegedly installed years ago, long before he ever met me. I sat on a rickety cot and watched Ava color. Her drawings had changed. Less unicorns and rainbows. More shadows. More eyes. Do you like this one? She asked, holding up a sketch. It was a girl I realized standing on top of a mountain, facing a storm. Behind her, a dragon with golden eyes stood guard. It's beautiful, I whispered. She beamed. That night, Ellis told me everything. Victor Lane hadn't always been a financial executive. He had once worked deep undercover within an off-books intelligence task force. Their target, financial systems used by domestic officials to funnel dark money into illegal networks. The higher they climbed, the darker the trail became. Senator Caleb Harlan was at the heart of it. Not just a puppet master, but a bridge between white-collar corruption and violent global syndicates. When Victor realized how well and Pierce was being used as a laundering front, he tried to expose it from within. But his cover had been burned. And now, so was mine. You're not a bystander anymore, Natalie Ellis said. You're the final key. The last loose end. That transfer you flagged unlocked the dead man's switch he built into the system. I frowned. What do you mean, dead man switch? Ellis turned his laptop to face me. The screen showed a chain of logs, all tied to my employee ID. You were his failsafe. If he died or vanished, your account would trigger the release of everything. Names. Accounts. Locations. And now they know. I felt sick. My hands trembled. So what now? I asked. Ellis leaned forward. We need to finish it. There's a final file somewhere. Victor split the data into 3 segments. We have 2. The third? We think it's embedded in a place only you have access to. Where? Your daughter's school. The blood drained from my face. You think he used my daughter's school as a data drop? Ellis nodded. Specifically, your login to the school's cloud system. There's an encrypted file buried under her student records. We picked up traces of it. Victor must have used your school account, knowing no one would look there. Mason returned then, his face grim. We don't have time. We've been pinged. What? The burner. I left one active to lure them. Someone hid it. They're 3 hours out. Maybe less. My heart dropped. We had a choice. Stay hidden and let the data die with us, or head back into the storm and retrieve the final piece. I looked at Ava. Then I stood. We go back. 3 hours later, we were on the road again. The plan was simple. Break into the school system remotely from a public network, download the file, transmit it through Ellis's secure uplink, and trigger Victor's master key. But, of course, nothing went according to plan. As I logged into the school portal from an abandoned gas station, snow swirling outside, my screen flickered. Then it went black. A single message appeared. "Hello, Natalie. We've been waiting." The message blinked on the screen, black letters stark against the white background. "Hello, Natalie. We've been waiting." The cursor pulsed like a heartbeat. I didn't speak. I didn't breathe. I felt Mason and Ellis freeze behind me. The gas station, once our temporary hideout, suddenly felt like a trap, a too quiet, too isolated cage. The screen flickered again. "If you send that file, we'll take her. You know we can." My stomach turned to ice. They had found us. Not just the location, but our weakness. Ava. Ellis was already typing into a second terminal, running trace blockers and scrambling IP signatures. Mason stood at the window, scanning the snowy parking lot with a sniper's stillness. I forced my hands to steady as I reached for the encrypted flash drive, the one containing the first 2 segments of Victor's data cache. I still needed the third. And now I knew exactly where it was. Under Ava's name, in the student health files. I bypassed the school's firewall with Ellis's help. The folder was hidden deep, masked as a corrupted audio file. I decrypted it using the passphrase Victor had embedded in the document he left me. "Let no one silence you." The screen flickered once more. Then lines of code unraveled across the screen like digital veins. Mason spoke without looking back. "They're close. We've got maybe 10 minutes. Ellis handed me a secured satellite uplink. "You press this button, it goes live to every major global outlet. Interpol. FBI. Everyone. But they'll come for us," I whispered. "They're already coming." I looked at Ava. She was sitting in the back, clutching her dragon, her green eyes wide but calm. Brave. Always brave. I pressed the button. The moment I did, a tremor shook the air, not from the upload, but from a black SUV skidding to a stop just outside the station. Ellis yelled, "Time's up." I grabbed Ava and ran for the back door as Mason opened fire through the front. Bullets shattered the windows. Snow burst upward as tires spun. We sprinted through the back alley, my breath visible in frantic puffs, my pulse deafening in my ears. Behind us, chaos. Ahead of us, only forest. We reached the tree line just as the uplink completed. My cell phone buzzed. One word, live. It was done. By the next morning, the world had changed. News reports were everywhere. Victor Lane's final testimony, the entire conspiracy laid bare. Accounts, names, dates, crimes. Caleb Harlan was arrested attempting to board a private jet. The Justice Department launched an immediate investigation. High-ranking officials vanished overnight. Protests filled the streets. And I became invisible again, but this time on purpose. The agency gave us new names, new IDs, a new life. A quiet house in the countryside. A school for Ava where her name wasn't flagged in any database. No more passwords. No more secrets. Just us. Months passed. The snow melted. Spring came. Ava drew dragons again, this time surrounded by stars instead of shadows. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, she turned to me and asked, "Did we win?" I thought of Victor. Of Ellis and Mason, wherever they were. Of the lives saved. The truth exposed. "Yes," I said, pulling her close. "We won." She rested her head against me. "Good. Because the dragon in my dreams said it's time to rest." I smiled, tears prickling my eyes. It was over. For now. Because sometimes, being a hero doesn't mean having powers. Sometimes it means noticing what no one else does. Refusing to stay silent. Protecting what matters. My name is Natalie Reyes. And I was never meant to be a hero. But I became one anyway.